The story begins not in the bustling streets of Accra, nor in the port cities where ships once anchored, but in the cold, sterile corridors of a Dutch museum. Behind locked glass, rows of skulls stare silently into the void, labeled, catalogued, stripped of the lives they once carried. For decades, they were treated as relics of science, stripped of memory, stripped of dignity. But in 2025, a discovery shattered centuries of silence. DNA extracted from these skulls revealed living descendants still walking the soil of Ghana, descendants not of Africans alone, but of Asian slave traders whose presence in West Africa had long been written out of memory. This revelation forces us to confront a forgotten intersection of histories: Asia, Africa, and Europe, bound together by the chains of slavery and the shadows of empire. And it asks us a haunting question: how many of our identities are built on buried truths that museums and archives have quietly hidden away? To understand how Asian lineages became entangled with Ghana's coastal communities, we must return to the 16th and 17th centuries. The West African coast was not only a gateway for Europeans hungry for gold and human lives, it was also a crossroads for Asian merchants drawn into global trade networks. From the 1500s onward, Portuguese, Dutch, and later British ships did not sail alone. They carried Indian, Malay, and even Javanese sailors, soldiers, and traders, recruited through the vast networks of the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. By the early 1600s, Elmina Castle, the oldest European fort in sub-Saharan Africa, was no longer just a place where Africans were imprisoned before being shipped across the Atlantic. It was also a melting pot where Dutch officials, Asian auxiliaries, and African intermediaries converged. Asian soldiers and merchants, often brought against their will as indentured laborers or convicts from Batavia, Goa, or Malacca, found themselves stationed in West Africa. Some remained, intermarrying with local women, leaving bloodlines that would blur the boundaries between African and Asian identities. And yet the colonial records that survive rarely speak of these unions in human terms. Instead, they reduce them to ledgers, lists, and curiosities. Dutch officials often referred to these individuals as maardijkers, or company slaves, their identities reduced to categories of labor and race. But the oral traditions of Ghanaian families tell a different story. Stories of ancestors with unusual features, strange languages, or foreign names whose origins were never fully explained. For centuries, these fragments remained unconnected, hidden in the folds of family memory. But in 2025, the science of DNA ripped the veil away. When Dutch researchers sequenced the remains of skulls taken from Ghana in the late 19th century, skulls shipped to Europe under the guise of anthropological study, they found unmistakable genetic markers linking them not only to modern Ghanaian communities, but to Southeast Asia. The descendants were living in towns along the coast, their heritage hidden in plain sight. This was not just a scientific finding, it was an emotional rupture. Families in Ghana, who had long considered their ancestry purely African, now faced the revelation that their bloodlines were shaped by the shadowy presence of Asian traders, some of whom had participated in the very trade that enslaved Africans. What does it mean when your ancestor was both a victim and a collaborator, a captive and a traitor? The revelation cut deep into questions of identity, memory, and justice. But the story does not stop at DNA. The very skulls that revealed these truths carried their own sinister journey. In the late 1800s, Dutch anthropologists collected human remains from West Africa, often without consent, often desecrating graves, to bring them back to museums in Leiden and Amsterdam. These skulls were measured, photographed, and classified under racial theories that sought to rank humanity. To European scientists, they were specimens. To the communities left behind, they were fathers, mothers, ancestors. Their removal was not only a theft of the body, but a theft of memory. And now, more than a century later, those same skulls, once used to justify racial hierarchies, have returned as bearers of truth. Their DNA has spoken, linking continents, collapsing the lies of empire. One of the most haunting revelations came from the skull of a man catalogued simply as Specimen 42. He was taken from the coastal region near Cape Coast in 1884. For more than 100 years, nothing was known of him, until DNA sequencing revealed ties both to the Akan people of Ghana and to the Malay archipelago. His living descendants, traced through genetic markers, still live today in Ghana, unaware until now that the Akande skull was sitting in a European museum. Another revelation came from oral history. In the Fonte communities along Ghana's coast, there are proverbs and songs that speak of strangers from across the black waters who stayed and became kin. For generations, such stories were dismissed as myth, but DNA has now given them a chilling confirmation. What was once folklore has become historical fact. The emotional impact of these revelations cannot be understated. In Ghana, families wrestle with pride and shame. Pride in rediscovering long-silenced ancestors, but shame in learning that some may have played roles in the machinery of slavery. In the Netherlands, museums face a reckoning. Should these skulls be returned to Ghana for proper burial? Should apologies be offered for the desecration of graves and the theft of remains? Or should they remain locked in European institutions, their secrets extracted, but their dignity still denied? The discovery also reshapes how we understand the slave trade itself. We often picture it as a simple triangle: Europe, Africa, the Americas. But the DNA in these skulls forces us to redraw the map. It was not just a triangle, but a web, stretching from Batavia to Elmina, from Goa to Cape Coast, from the Malay archipelago to the Gold Coast. The lives of Africans and Asians were entangled in ways that textbooks rarely admit, bound together not by choice but by empire. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all is this: how many more skulls lie in European museums, waiting to tell stories of hidden ancestries? How many lineages are still split between continents, unaware of their shared past? The Dutch collections are vast, but they are not unique. British, French, and German museums hold thousands of African remains, many of them stripped from burial grounds under colonial rule. Each skull is a silent archive, waiting for the day when DNA gives it voice. As we stand in 2025, we are confronted with both possibility and responsibility. DNA technology has given us a key to unlock secrets buried for centuries, but science alone cannot heal the wounds of history. The descendants of those found in Ghana deserve not only knowledge, but dignity, not only revelation, but respect. And the museums that house their ancestors must decide: will they remain guardians of stolen remains, or will they finally return them to the soil where they belong? The story of the Asian slave traders in Ghana is not just about trade, or empire, or even DNA. It is about the fragility of memory, the resilience of families, and the haunting persistence of truth. It is a reminder that history is never as simple as the lines drawn in textbooks. It is messy, painful, and astonishing. And sometimes it takes the voice of the dead speaking through their bones to remind us of who we really are. And so the mystery remains. If Asian bloodlines were hidden in Ghana for centuries, how many other untold connections lie buried beneath the surface of Africa? What other secrets do the museums of Europe still hold behind locked doors? And when the next skull speaks, whose story will it tell? This is History Off the Map. If you believe stories like this must be heard, if you believe the past must be faced, no matter how uncomfortable, then join us, subscribe, share, and continue uncovering the hidden truths that history tried to erase. Because the past is not dead, it is waiting to be heard.